I'm Lauren, though most people just call me Lo. I'm 29 and finally living on my own with a steady career as a UX designer in Austin. My relationship with my parents has always been complicated, especially when money is involved. Every year, they whisk my younger sister Mia away on some extravagant vacation. I'm talking five-star resorts in Greece, wine tasting tours in Italy, yacht cruises in Croatia. Me, I was usually left behind with a polite excuse and a fridge magnet. But this year was different. They called me and said, "We thought maybe you'd like to join the family trip." I was shocked. Then came the catch. They'd be happy to include me as long as I paid my own way. I said no thanks. Then a notification buzzed on my phone. My credit card had already been charged for their flights, their hotel rooms, and their spa packages. That was the moment everything changed. Growing up, I always felt like I was walking on a different path than the rest of my family. My parents, David and Karen, had clear expectations for their daughters, but those expectations were not applied equally. Mia, my younger sister by 3 years, was the golden child from the start. She was bright, artistic, charismatic, and had this effortless charm that made people want to be around her. My parents saw her as their little star, their investment. Me, I was the practical one, the one who had to learn to take care of herself early. When I was 16, I got my first job at a local bookstore. Not because I wanted pocket money, but because my parents said if you want extra clothes or outings with friends, you'll have to earn it. Mia, on the other hand, was given a debit card the day she turned 13 and never once had to work through high school. That pattern continued into adulthood. While I was juggling community college and part-time work, Mia was flown to an expensive art school in New York. My parents told me, "We're investing in her talent. You're independent, you'll figure it out." And I did. I worked my way through a design boot camp, took freelance gigs on the side, and eventually landed a solid job at a tech company in Austin. I scraped and saved for everything I had from my apartment's down payment to my used Toyota Corolla. It was never that my parents were openly cruel. It was more subtle than that. It was the way they used the word responsible when referring to me, and the word special when talking about Mia. It was how they expected me to send money home during tight months or pick up groceries when they were hosting holidays without ever acknowledging it. And when my mom had a health scare last year, I was the one who used my personal credit card to book her emergency flight home. "We'll pay you back," she promised. They never did. At the time, I let it go, because that's what I'd always done. Mia, meanwhile, was thriving, or at least that's what it looked like online. Her Instagram feed was full of cappuccinos in Milan, rooftop selfies, in Paris lazy mornings and spa hotels. My parents liked and commented on every single post. I never resented Mia for getting help. I resented the silence that came with my struggles. That's why when I finally moved into my own apartment last spring, it felt like a quiet rebellion. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had earned every square inch of my space. So when my parents called a few weeks ago with an unexpected invitation to join the family vacation, part of me was startled. Part of me was curious. And maybe deep down, part of me wanted to believe they were finally seeing me as part of the family again. But that hope didn't last long. "We're going to Tuscany this year," my mom said brightly. "It'll be so good to have you there with us. Of course, you'd need to cover your portion. Flights are about 1,500 and the villa is around 6 grand. Totally manageable, right?" Manageable for who? The Tuscany trip wasn't the first time my parents had dangled inclusion like a prize, only to tie it to a financial cost they assumed I'd be willing or obligated to pay. It had always been like this. I remember being 19, halfway through community college, living at home, and working evenings at a diner. My parents said it was only fair that I pay rent now that I was an adult. It didn't matter that I was barely making enough to buy groceries and textbooks. I handed over $500 a month every month just to sleep in my childhood bedroom and use a shared bathroom with peeling wallpaper. Meanwhile, Mia took a gap year in Europe that somehow stretched into 18 months. My parents wired her money weekly, calling it travel experience, and telling anyone who asked that she was finding her creative voice. When I brought it up once, just once, my dad said, "Lauren, you've always been more grounded. She's delicate. She needs a different kind of support." That became the running theme. I was sturdy, dependable, fine on my own. So naturally, any help I needed was seen as weakness. And any help Mia needed was considered essential. It didn't stop at rent either. When I got my first full-time job as a junior designer, My parents congratulated me, then asked if I'd be willing to help cover part of the mortgage for a few months. The few months turned into 2 years. No paperwork, no interest, no official agreement, just family. They never acknowledged it again. When I was 24, my car broke down. I needed nearly 2 grand in repairs. I asked my parents for a small loan, just a temporary bridge until payday. They said no. We're not a bank, Lauren. You need to manage your finances like an adult. 2 months later, they gifted Mia a used Audi for her 21st birthday. It had a giant red bow on the hood and everything. I said nothing. I smiled and took the photos. Then there was the student loan incident. I'd applied for a private loan to help with the final stretch of my UX boot camp. My credit wasn't strong enough to get the amount I needed, so my dad offered to co-sign. Just sign these, he said casually. I didn't think twice until a year later, when I noticed odd activity on my credit report. There was an extra loan in my name I had never touched. When I confronted him, he waved it off. It's for a home renovation. We needed a new HVAC system. It's in your name, sure, but we're making the payments. Except they weren't. The account was months past due. My credit score took a hit, and I had to fight tooth and nail to clean it up. It took 2 years to dispute the charges and isolate the loan. My father never apologized. My mother said, "You'll understand when you have a family someday." The worst part, I kept letting it happen because they were my parents, because I was conditioned to believe that family meant loyalty, silence, endurance. Every time I tried to set a boundary, I was told I was being ungrateful. Every time I asked for fairness, I was made to feel like I was attacking them. And still I helped. When my mother had a minor stroke 2 years ago and needed to fly home from Florida, I was the one who booked the last-minute flight. My credit card, my frequent flyer points, will reimburse you, they said. They never did. Even small gestures turned into guilt trips. A few Christmases ago, I spent extra to buy them a weekend getaway package, something thoughtful because they'd been talking about wanting a break from the cold. I found the perfect cabin upstate, coordinated the dates, and sent them the details. They went, but didn't say thank you. When I brought it up later, my dad said, "Well, you make more money than we do. It's not like you can't afford it." But when Mia took them to brunch and paid for coffee and croissants, they posted about it on Facebook with captions like, "Our sweet girl, always thinking of us." So yes, when they called me out of the blue this spring and invited me on the Tuscany trip, part of me should have seen it for what it was. Not a genuine gesture, not a bridge-building moment. It was another performance. Another chance for them to look generous while expecting me to play along. Pay my way, carry the cost, keep quiet. And I almost said yes. I nearly told them, "Okay, I'll figure it out." I opened my spreadsheet of savings goals, calculated how much I'd need to pull from my condo fund, and even made a list of freelance clients I could take on for extra cash. Because some tiny part of me still wanted to belong, still wanted to sit at that villa table overlooking a vineyard with a glass of wine and finally feel like I was included. But I stopped myself. I texted my mom the next day and said, "Thanks for thinking of me, but I'll pass this year. I've got some financial priorities I can't compromise." She replied with a thumbs up emoji, and that was that, or so I thought. Until my phone lit up with a new notification 2 days later. It was a Tuesday morning when the alert hit my phone. I had just settled into my desk at the office, sipping my second coffee and reviewing UX prototypes when I saw it. Unusual activity detected on your credit card. Recent charges exceed typical spending pattern. I frowned. I hadn't used that card in weeks, not since I'd transferred most of my recurring payments to a new one with better rewards. That particular card was only active for emergencies or travel, and it had a relatively low limit. Still, I logged into the app just to be safe. My stomach dropped. There they were, multiple transactions processed within the last 48 hours. Charges that had nothing to do with me. First-class flights to Florence, 3 round-trip tickets, villa rental paid in full, not a deposit, not a hold the full amount, over $5,000, spa reservations, winery tours, private driver bookings, restaurant prepayments for a Michelin star tasting menu, over $9,000. I scrolled further, my hands shaking. A second page of transactions included deposits for a yacht charter in Venice and custom luggage orders from a high-end boutique. I froze. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. Someone had used my credit card to pay for a luxury European vacation, and not just their share. The entire trip. I stared at the screen, the breath leaving my body like a slow deflation. I clicked into the transaction history, then into the saved devices connected to the account. And there it was, an old iPad registered to my mother from years ago when I had helped her check into a flight. I must have left the card info saved back then, and apparently no one had forgotten. I closed the app. Then I reopened, it went to the dispute center and hit dispute all. I requested an immediate freeze on the account. Within 5 minutes, the card was locked and a new one was being shipped to my apartment. I sat still, the buzz of the office around me suddenly muted. My parents had used my card. They knew they hadn't gotten my permission. They knew I had said no. They knew what that card was, and they had chosen to use it anyway. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a group text. Mia had added me to a thread titled Tuscany with a selfie of her and our parents at the airport. Mom, so excited to finally take a trip as a whole family. It's been too long. Mia, it's gonna be epic. I told them you'd cave. Dad, get some rest before the flight. Big days ahead. I didn't respond. They had fully assumed I'd stay silent. They thought I'd find out, be angry for a minute, and then pay it off like I always had. They were counting on my loyalty, my fear of confrontation, my belief that family meant forgiveness. But something inside me had shifted. Maybe it was the years of being dismissed and disregarded. Maybe it was the feeling of having finally built something for myself brick by brick and watching them try to bulldoze it. Or maybe it was just plain exhaustion. Whatever it was, I knew this time had to be different. I opened a new note on my phone and began documenting everything: screenshots of the charges, dates, saved devices, text threads, even the timestamp of the flight booking. Then I called the credit card company to confirm the dispute and ensure the freeze was complete. The agent on the line, a woman named Jenna, listened calmly as I explained what had happened. So, just to confirm, she said carefully, "You did not authorize any of these purchases." "No," I said. "I explicitly told them I wouldn't be going, and I never gave permission for them to use my card." There was a pause. "I'll escalate this to the fraud department," she said. "You'll receive confirmation shortly. And just for peace of mind, we'll issue a new account number entirely." I thanked her and hung up. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt clear. They hadn't made a mistake. They'd made a choice. And now they were going to face the consequences. The next day was their departure date, and I already knew what was coming. Wednesday morning, I arrived at work with my phone buzzing before I'd even stepped out of the car. The first text was from Mia. "Hey, where are you? Thought we were meeting at the gate." I blinked. Then another message. "Mom's getting worried. We're already through security. Board in 40 mins." I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, a call from my dad came through. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. And another. The flurry of texts started next. "Dad, Lauren, they're saying the payment was declined. The tickets aren't valid." "What's going on?" "Mia, they're not letting us board. Did something happen to your card?" I opened the thread, paused for a second, and typed a response. "What you said, I'm paying my own way." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then Dad again. "Don't be dramatic, this isn't funny. Fix this now." Mia, "We're at the gate and they're saying there's no record of confirmation. You need to call them." I didn't reply. I turned off my phone, locked my screen, and put it in my drawer. I felt my heart beating through my chest as I walked into the office kitchen. My coworker Ava looked up from the coffee machine. "You okay?" "You look tense. Just family stuff." She nodded. "That kind of day." Something like that. By lunch, my phone had racked up 16 missed calls, 8 from my dad, 5 from Mia, 3 from my mom. The voicemails had escalated from confusion to anger. Dad voice strained. "This is unacceptable, Lauren. You left us stranded. We had to rebook everything on our emergency card. This was sabotage." Mom near tears. "How could you do this to us after everything we've done for you?" That line made me laugh bitterly out loud. Everything they'd done for me, I reopened the credit card app. The disputed charges were officially in process. The account was locked. The new card had been shipped. I'd taken screenshots of all communication. This time I had receipts. Later that afternoon, Mia texted one last time. We made it onto a later flight, but now Dad's furious. He says you owe him $11,000. What's your plan here? I didn't answer, because for the first time in my life I had one, and it didn't involve keeping their secrets anymore. The day after the airport chaos, I worked remotely from home. Part of it was convenience, but mostly it was about wanting to be in my own space, surrounded by my things, my walls, my peace. Or at least what I thought was peace. I hadn't heard from my parents since the rebooking meltdown. The silence after all their shouting was eerie. I expected more rage texts, more guilt trips, maybe even a long-winded email from my mom full of passive-aggressive Bible quotes. But nothing came. By noon, it felt like the calm before a storm. It arrived at 2:43 p.m. I had just finished a Zoom check-in with my manager and walked to the kitchen to refill my water when I heard the unmistakable sound of my front door rattling. At first, I thought it was the mail carrier. Then I heard voices, low, urgent. Where does she keep her paperwork? That was my mother. She always files stuff by color tabs. Another voice said Mia. She's probably got it locked. Just get what you can, my father barked. I froze. They were in my apartment. I don't remember how my body moved, just that 1 second I was holding a water glass and the next I was dialing 911. There are 3 people in my apartment, I told the dispatcher, my voice steadier than expected. They're my parents and sister. They broke in. I did not give them permission to enter. The dispatcher asked if I was safe, and I told her I was in my bathroom with the door locked. She stayed on the line while I heard drawers opening, paper shuffling footsteps in the hallway. We're just looking for the statements, my mother snapped from the living room. We'll fix this if we can just find the right documents. I told you she'd keep it digital, Mia muttered. Everything's in the cloud now. Try her laptop, Dad said. My heart dropped. They were trying to access my devices, probably to delete something, probably to cover their tracks. But they didn't know I had already backed up all files to an encrypted folder in the cloud, secured with 2-factor authentication. I had already submitted evidence of the credit card fraud to both the issuer and my attorney. They were too late. 5 minutes later, there was a loud knock on the door. Police, a female voice called. Step away from the door, hands visible. I slowly exited the bathroom and opened the door just as 2 officers stepped into my apartment. My parents and Mia were standing near the couch, my laptop on the coffee table, papers scattered everywhere. My father raised his hands halfway in the air. This is all a misunderstanding. This is our daughter's apartment, my mother added, voice trembling. We were just trying to clear up a financial issue. She wouldn't answer our calls. The female officer turned to me. Ma'am, do you know these people? They're my family, I said. And they broke in. I never gave them a key. They forced the lock. I want to press charges, I added louder this time. All 3 of them turned to look at me. Mia's face flushed with something between shock and embarrassment. My mom's lip trembled, her mascara smudged. My father's eyes narrowed. You can't be serious, he said. After everything we've done for you. Exactly, I said. After everything. The officer separated us to take statements. I repeated what I told dispatch. I showed them the damaged door frame. I pointed to the scattered documents and the laptop they'd tried to access. I showed them the text, the evidence of the fraud, the list of disputed charges, and the credit card statement. They're trying to cover their tracks, I said. They used my card without permission. I reported it. And now they're trying to find and erase proof. Officer Chin nodded as she took notes. We see this kind of thing more than you'd expect. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Officer Ramirez was speaking with my dad. She's making a mountain out of a molehill, I heard him say. It's family. She's being emotional. No, I said clearly, I'm being done. Eventually, the officers escorted them out. No cuffs yet, but a full report was filed. My laptop was taken temporarily for evidence processing, and my landlord was notified about the break-in and property damage. When the door closed behind them, the apartment was quiet again. Too quiet. I looked around at the wreckage, papers out of place, drawers, left open, my favorite coffee mug broken on the floor. There was glass near the bookshelf. One of my houseplants had been knocked over. It wasn't just a break-in. It was a message. We can still get to you. I spent the evening at my friend Kira's place across town. She made pasta and poured wine while I told her everything, what had happened, what was happening now, what I planned to do next. You can't let this go, she said. I won't, She nodded. Then let's make sure they never get away with it again. That night, I emailed a lawyer. Her name was Jacqueline Diaz, and she specialized in financial abuse and fraud within families. I sent her everything: screenshots, documents, police report number, the entire history. By morning, she'd already replied. This isn't just toxic family behavior, she wrote. This is a pattern of financial exploitation. Let's take the next step. And I was ready. Jacqueline was calm, meticulous, and unapologetically firm. During our first consultation, she let me talk for nearly an hour straight. I laid out everything from the first time my parents guilted me into paying rent at 19 to the emergency flight for my mom to the break-in 2 days ago. I sent her screenshots, PDFs, voice memos, everything I had documented. When I finally finished, she took a breath and said, "Lauren, this isn't just emotional abuse or financial manipulation. It's a pattern of sustained exploitation. And it's actionable." I didn't cry. I thought I might. But instead, I felt an eerie calm. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. And I wasn't alone. Our first step was to file a restraining order. Jacqueline explained that the break-in gave us clear grounds: unauthorized entry, attempted tampering with personal property, and potential witness tampering, if this escalated into a criminal investigation. But the real bombshell came a few days later. Jacqueline had asked me for access to my full credit report and any older financial statements, just to confirm whether there were other irregularities. She warned me in advance: victims of long-term familial financial abuse often uncover deeper issues once they start digging. She wasn't wrong. As I combed through old documents from my early 20s, scanned PDFs, old emails folders I hadn't touched in years, I found something odd. It was a confirmation email for a loan I didn't recognize. The amount was $22,000 issued to me when I was 22. But I didn't remember applying for any loan that year. I forwarded it to Jacqueline immediately. "That's a personal line of credit," she said after reviewing it. "Taken in your name. It would require either your social security number and full personal information or forged documents." We pulled the application. The signature was shaky, sloppy, definitely not mine. I had no recollection of signing anything like that. The bank had approved the loan based on a cosigner, my father. When I confronted my credit history more closely, I realized the account had been paid off quietly over the span of 6 years, likely with money funneled through my parents' accounts. It had gone unnoticed because the payments were made just in time to avoid default, keeping the account from triggering alerts. But it had still been my name, my credit, my liability. I felt nauseous. They had not only used my card to fund a vacation I wasn't invited to, but they had taken out an entire loan in my name and paid it off without telling me, just to keep me in the dark. Jacqueline's tone was sharper now. "This is fraud, period. Even if they paid it off, that doesn't absolve them. They used your identity without consent." I asked her the question that had been buzzing in my head since the break-in. "What happens if I sue them?" She paused, then said plainly, "Then we treat them like any other party who commits financial fraud. We gather evidence, we file, and we pursue damages. Even though they're my family, especially because they're your family, because they knew they could get away with it." By the following week, we had filed a civil suit for unauthorized credit use, identity fraud, emotional distress, and property damage related to the break-in. Jacqueline also helped me file an incident report with the local police regarding the fraudulent loan. Once the papers were served, all hell broke loose. I got a call from an unknown number while I was on my lunch break. I didn't pick up. Then came a voicemail. It was my mother. "Lauren, this has gone too far. You're tearing this family apart over a misunderstanding. We paid that loan back. We always intended to. And now you're making it public. This isn't how you handle family business." An hour later, Mia called. "Are you seriously suing Mom and Dad?" "What are you thinking?" I didn't respond. Instead, I sent everything to Jacqueline. She told me to keep all communication documented and not to reply. That weekend, a letter arrived from their lawyer. It was a half-baked settlement offer. Essentially, drop the case and they'd agree to discuss reimbursement. No admission of wrongdoing, no apology, no promise not to repeat the behavior. Jacqueline drafted a response, a hard no. This is only the beginning, she told me. If we proceed, we may also discover other violations, tax issues, undisclosed accounts, or misuse of your SSN. And she was right again. A week later, while reviewing old tax forms for discrepancies, Jacqueline found that for 2 consecutive years in my early 20s, my parents had claimed me as a dependent after I had moved out and was filing my own returns. Not only that, but they had used those filings to qualify for certain deductions and a refinancing loan on their home. They'd essentially used my identity as a financial cushion. Again, without my knowledge. The anger this time wasn't hot. It was cold, settled, resolved. I wasn't mad about Tuscany anymore. I was mad about the years I'd spent questioning my instincts, about how often I'd told myself it was my fault for not being more generous, about how long I believed that being a good daughter meant staying quiet. Jacqueline filed an amendment to the suit to include tax fraud and misuse of identity in government documents. The damages were now estimated at over $85,000. My parents' lawyer tried to delay the hearing. Jacqueline blocked it. Mia texted me one last time. Whatever happened to loyalty, I stared at the message for a full minute before responding. Loyalty isn't the same as silence, and I don't owe anyone the right to keep hurting me. The lawsuit went public a few weeks later. Not because I wanted it to, but because someone in their neighborhood found the court filing online and started talking. It spread quickly, first through the church my parents had attended for over 20 years, then through family friends and distant cousins. Suddenly, my quiet act of self-defense became a community spectacle. A neighbor posted in their church's Facebook group asking, "Does anyone know what happened with the Hendersons?" Something about a financial dispute with their daughter. Someone else commented, "Heard she's suing them over credit cards and loans. So sad when families turn on each other. No one asked what led to it. No one questioned how it could have been prevented. They just clung to the simplest version of the story, the one where the daughter was bitter, the parents were heartbroken, and the family was falling apart." My mother unsurprisingly leaned into that narrative. She called my Aunt Donna on the East Coast sobbing, told her I'd turned into someone unrecognizable, that I'd betrayed the family out of nowhere. Said I'd always been difficult, always jealous of Mia. Aunt Donna called me a few days later, unsure of what to believe. I told her the full truth about the stolen credit card charges, the fake loan, the break-in, the fraudulent tax filings. I sent her documents, screenshots, the police report. She went quiet for a long time. Then she said I had no idea. "Your mother made it sound so emotional, but this is criminal." Yes, it was. And yet, even with the facts in front of them, most of the extended family stayed silent. A few reached out privately. An old cousin I hadn't spoken to in years messaged, "Just wanted to say I believe you. Families can be complicated, but for the most part, people didn't want to get involved." Meanwhile, my parents' lives began to unravel in other ways. My father's accounting business, already struggling, started losing clients. A few longtime partners quietly dropped out, citing loss of trust. One client sent him an email that was later leaked to Jacqueline's office. It read, "Given your current legal entanglements and questions of financial ethics, we'll be seeking services elsewhere." Mia, who had always been the family's rising star, suddenly found herself in an awkward position. She had just started a marketing internship at a luxury travel brand, and when news of the lawsuit hit the group chat, one of her coworkers sent her a clip message. "Any relation to the Lauren Henderson case?" She didn't last the month. I don't know if she quit or was quietly let go, but her social media went silent soon after. No more beachside photos. No more wine glass selfies. One day, a new account popped up private under a different name. But I knew it was her. She never followed me back. The most surreal part came one evening when I stopped by the grocery store near my old neighborhood. As I reached for a bag of oranges, I heard a familiar voice behind me. My goodness, Lauren. It was Mrs. Patel, my parents' old neighbor. She gave me a once-over, then smiled. "I just want to say I don't know the whole story, but I'm proud of you. Most people wouldn't stand up to their own parents. But sometimes that's what it takes." I thanked her, stunned. It was the first time someone had said it out loud. Later that night, I sat on my couch rereading old texts from Mia, the way she used to call me annoying for not just going along, the way my parents had always expected me to be the bridge, the fixer. Not anymore. The bridge was burned, and for the first time I wasn't racing to rebuild it. After the fallout settled and the legal gears began turning on their own, a strange sense of quiet filled my life. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was something close. It was the absence of chaos. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up to messages from my parents asking for favors. I didn't feel the invisible weight of expectations or the subtle guilt of not being more helpful. I didn't flinch every time my phone buzzed. I had space. I took time off work just a few days, but enough to clear my head. During those days, I cleaned my apartment from top to bottom. I replaced the broken coffee mug my dad had knocked over during the break-in. I repotted my surviving plants. I ordered new locks, then worked with the building's maintenance team to install a security system. It felt symbolic, securing my home, securing my space, securing my life. I met with Jacqueline to finalize the next stages of the civil suit. By now, the damages had climbed to over $90,000. Factoring in the fraudulent loan, the break-in repairs legal fees, and emotional distress. My parents' lawyer attempted another negotiation. We declined. They had stolen too much for too long. Meanwhile, I started putting things back into motion for myself. I went back to work with a different kind of energy. My team noticed it too. My manager pulled me aside during a check-in and said, "Whatever you've been through, you're coming out stronger, sharper, clearer." She was right. I started speaking up more in meetings. I pitched bolder ideas. I even led a UX accessibility audit that ended up winning our team a small industry award. For the first time, I was no longer pouring my emotional reserves into people who only drained me. Instead, I was investing in myself. Outside of work, I made space for joy. I started walking every morning before sunrise. Just me, the quiet, and the streetlights flickering off as the world woke up. I signed up for a weekend ceramics class, something I'd always wanted to try but never gave myself permission to enjoy. I wasn't good at it, but I didn't care. I liked the feeling of my hands in clay, the gentle spinning of the wheel, the permission to make something imperfect and still keep it. I also started seeing a therapist. Not just for the trauma of the past year, but for the decades of conditioning that taught me to put myself last. Dr. Ellis, a quiet and no-nonsense woman in her 50s, helped me untangle the knots. She gave me language for things I had always felt but never known how to name. Enmeshment, financial abuse, boundary violation. It's not selfish to walk away, she told me during our third session. It's survival. One of my first assignments was to define what safety looked like to me. Not physical safety, emotional safety. It took me a week, but eventually I wrote safety means being able to say no without fearing the loss of love. Safety means not having to explain my choices. Safety means silence that doesn't feel like punishment. That became my compass. Every time I wondered if I'd gone too far, I reread that list. One day I took a deep breath and started a blog. Just a small one. Anonymous at first. I called it Lines in the Ledger. It was part personal story, part financial literacy. A space where I could talk about money identity and what happens when those things get twisted inside families. To my surprise, it started gaining traction. People emailed, left comments, shared their own stories. A woman in Oregon wrote, "I thought I was the only one whose parents opened credit cards in her name." A retired teacher in Ohio wrote, "Your story gave me permission to say no to my daughter, who's been financially draining me for years." It was the first time I felt that my pain had a purpose. One day, an editor from a mid-sized lifestyle magazine reached out. She wanted to interview me for a feature on adult children setting boundaries with financially manipulative parents. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't ready to be public. I didn't want the attention. But then I thought about how many years I had lived in silence. So I said yes. We met at a local cafe. I told her my story piece by piece. We kept certain details private to protect the ongoing legal process, but the heart of it was intact. When the article was published, the headline read, "She froze her parents out after they charged $9,000 to her card." But that was just the beginning. The response was overwhelming. People reached out from across the country. Some had similar stories, some were in the middle of their own financial disentangling. Some just wanted to say thank you for telling the truth. And in all of it, I felt lighter, stronger. Not healed, not yet, but free. Healing doesn't happen in a straight line. It loops, it stutters. Some mornings I still wake up with a knot in my chest, unsure if I made the right decision, even when every piece of evidence says I did. But I've learned that the truth isn't something you feel your way into. It's something you hold on to when the noise gets too loud. I used to believe being a good daughter meant self-sacrifice, keeping the peace, saying yes, giving without hesitation, without question, without boundaries. But boundaries are not betrayals. Saying no is not cruelty. And choosing peace over obligation is not weakness, it's maturity. I think that truth matters most to the people in my audience who are older. People who've spent decades parenting, partnering, giving everything they had to keep their families together. Many of you might recognize that same guilt I carried for so long, the kind that whispers, "You're the only one holding things together. If you let go, the whole thing will fall apart." But here's what I learned. If the whole thing falls apart because you said no, it was never solid to begin with. I didn't destroy my family. I stopped letting them destroy me. The silence that followed the lawsuit, the therapy, the press coverage, it was heavy at first. But over time, it became something else. A clearing, a pause, room for something new. My relationship with my parents remains non-existent. We haven't spoken since the settlement was finalized. They paid a portion of the damages under legal pressure and court order, but never offered a real apology. Not a text, not a call, just silence and resentment. I suspect they still believe they were the victims in all this. And honestly, that's no longer my responsibility. Mia hasn't reached out since her final text, the one about loyalty. I wish I could say I hate her, but I don't. I pity her. Because I think she still believes love is earned through performance, that you have to prove your worth to deserve softness. It's how we were both raised in different ways. But I'm not waiting anymore for her to understand. I've built something new, a small, warm circle of people who see me, friends who ask questions before making assumptions, clients who respect my time, readers who say me too instead of how could you. I've redefined what family means. It's no longer just blood, it's trust, it's accountability, it's mutual care. I think that's something many older adults, especially women, need to hear. That family can be chosen. That walking away from the people who raised you doesn't make you a villain. That healing doesn't mean going back. Sometimes it means building forward. Recently, I took a solo trip to a quiet coastal town. It wasn't fancy. No luxury resorts, just a modest Airbnb and a view of the water. I walked along the shore every morning, read books in the afternoon, ate dinner without making conversation, slept deeply. On my last night there, I wrote a letter I never planned to send to my parents. It said I used to think all I wanted was to belong, to be included, to feel like part of the family. But what I really wanted was to be respected, heard, trusted. You saw me as difficult because I asked for fairness. You called me selfish when I started saying no. You tried to keep me small by tying my love to a price tag. But I'm done paying, and I'm finally free. Then I folded the letter and burned it in the fireplace. Sometimes closure doesn't come with an apology. Sometimes it comes when you stop waiting for one. 1 year ago, I would have never imagined sharing this story. Not publicly, not honestly, not without shame. But something changes when you stop hiding, when you stop shrinking to make others comfortable, when you finally say out loud, "What happened to me was wrong, and I didn't deserve it." I know this story wasn't easy to hear. For some of you, it might have stirred memories you've buried for years. Maybe you were the daughter who always gave too much, or the son who was always the backup plan. Maybe you've been the one keeping secrets for the sake of family peace. And maybe you're realizing that peace built on silence isn't peace at all. If that's you, I want you to know you are not alone. You are not selfish for wanting boundaries. You are not cruel for wanting accountability. And you are not broken for needing distance from the people who taught you to question your worth. Family isn't just who raises you. Family is who respects you. It took me years to learn that. Years of justifying. Years of convincing myself I was strong enough to handle it. Whatever it was, financial manipulation, emotional guilt, exclusion dressed up as tradition. I was told to be grateful. Grateful that my parents taught me independence. Grateful that they let me figure things out on my own. Grateful even when they drained my savings, ignored my boundaries, and gaslit me into thinking I was unreasonable for expecting fairness. But now, I am grateful for myself. For the girl who finally said, "That's enough." For the woman who chose clarity over comfort. For the version of me who no longer needs anyone else's permission to protect her own peace. And I want that for you too. Wherever you are in your journey, just waking up to the imbalance, deep in the middle of disentangling, or learning how to rebuild afterward, I want you to know it's possible. You can unlearn the guilt. You can say no without explaining. You can live a full life without the approval of people who never saw your full worth. You can walk away even if you still love them, even if it hurts, even if it leaves you with questions that may never get answered. Because sometimes walking away is the only way to grow. And growth isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, like opening your own bank account, locking your door, turning off your phone, speaking up when you used to stay silent, making decisions that put your peace first, not last. So if you've ever felt torn between loyalty and self-respect, choose yourself. If you've ever been told that setting boundaries is ungrateful, do it anyway. If you've ever been afraid that saying no would mean losing everything, remember, you might just find yourself instead. And if this story made you think even a little about the lines you've been afraid to draw, I invite you to reflect. Ask yourself, what do I owe and to whom? Who do I give my energy to? And do they give it back with care? Healing doesn't always look like a reunion. Sometimes it looks like separation. Sometimes the healthiest choice is distance. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is protect your future from your past. And if someone says, "But they're family," you can calmly reply, "So am I." Thank you for listening, for reading, for holding space, and for honoring not just my story, but your own. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your experience. Have you ever had to set a boundary that changed everything? What did it cost you, and what did it give back? Drop a comment, share your story. And if you're still finding your voice, know that this is a space where it's safe to speak. Until then, be kind to yourself. And remember, standing up for yourself isn't betrayal, it's healing. And healing is always worth it.